The next war may begin long before the first missile is even fired. It could begin with a stolen signal, a jammed satellite, or one false piece of battlefield data. And the military that can protect its information could control the battlefield before the enemy even knows what is happening. The global powers are racing to deploy an unbreakable quantum shield before their digital kill chains are shattered. More in this next report. Take a look.
The next war will be fought over data, not bullets. Quantum could decide who keeps secrets and who loses them. A single split-second transmission decides modern combat. Satellites spot targets, drones scan the area closely, command centers feed fighter jets, and missiles lock on within seconds. But every link in this digital kill chain is vulnerable. Adversaries are actively listening, jamming frequencies, spoofing coordinates, and preparing to crack the encryption that keeps military networks alive. This is where quantum technology enters the scene. Quantum computers use qubits that can exist in multiple states at once through superposition and entanglement. This enables powerful parallel processing and could break almost all current encryption, promising unimaginable breakthroughs. Quantum computing offers many promises.
Quantum computing is going to the ultimate extreme where instead of making the transistor smaller and smaller, we're going to a single electron as the transistor. And so this unleashes a huge amount of computational power if you can exploit the strange properties of the quantum computer. So if you can find an algorithm that uses the properties of the quantum computer, then the potential is to be exponentially faster. And this means that we'll be able to solve problems which would otherwise be unsolvable.
But quantum's military value goes beyond computing. Quantum communication can protect the keys used to encrypt secret messages. In quantum key distribution, tiny particles of light carry the information needed to create those keys. Try to intercept the quantum signal and you disturb it. The system can detect that intrusion and reject the compromised key. Nations around the world are racing to turn quantum science into military capability. Experts say quantum sensing could transform warfare by potentially challenging the stealth and survivability of submarines and aircraft. China is already experimenting with quantum sensors for undersea tracking, while the US is pursuing quantum navigation and sensing. India is moving too. DRDO has completed military field trials of an indigenous fiber-based quantum key distribution system designed to protect strategic communications and form the basis for larger quantum networks. And the Indian Army has declared 2026 the year of networking and data centricity. The message is unmistakable. Tomorrow's battlefield may belong not to the army with the most bullets, but to the army whose data survives the attack. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
All right, to discuss this further, I'm now being joined by Colonel David B. de Roches. Professor, Thayer Marshall Institute, and a former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office of the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Colonel David, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for joining me here on Defense Pulse. Let's start with quantum technology, sir. Is it the next revolution in warfare? And also talk to us about quantum sensing. What is it and how can it change ISR capabilities?
Yeah, so it's more a revolution in communications that's being adapted to warfare, and because of the, as your report noted, because of the implications it has for both code breaking of previous secure non-quantum communications, as well as the difficulty of intercepting quantum communications. It obviously has a lot of application in military technology. There's still quite a few problems to be worked out, but all the major countries are working on quantum computing. It's a national focus. I know in the Chinese research plan, it is one of their major focuses. Not just for military applications, but especially for commercial applications, things like advanced notice of stocks and, of course, predictability of market trends. There's a lot of money to be made on it. It's still subject to, the messages still have to pass somehow. So there is a possibility of interference with the message along the route here. But generally, for the last 50 years, military operations have been more and more dependent on networks of different, aircraft, ships, artillery working together with the quest for perfect information. And anything that grants you the ability to have better networking of true knowledge of where you are and where the enemy is, and that's difficult to intercept. That is a definite advantage, and whoever possesses that first will have a significant advantage until somebody else possesses it as well.
And communications, there is no military ecosystem that can survive without it. It's most crucial. But let me come to the Chinese aspect that you mentioned in the earlier response. Reports suggest that China's growing quantum dominance has, in fact, forced US to adapt its formidable F-35 software. Could quantum technology make traditional military advantages such as stealth and secure communications obsolete at any point?
Well, quantum does have the ability to, what we consider to be secure communications would no longer be secure because it operates so fast. So if you take a conventional coded message, the fastest computer in the world, depending on the encryption, but let's just say it takes 1,000 years of the computer operating brute force to decrypt that. A quantum computer theoretically could do that in a matter of minutes. That's at least what the salesmen say. So that sort of communication will become not good against a peer competitor or somebody who possesses that technology. Stealth is a different thing. Stealth is about really radar reflection. So an image that's pushed up against the aircraft and then it's returned. Stealth dissipates that. So you still get a return, but it's not as big as a non-stealth aircraft, and it can be confused for something else. What the only real quantum application there is in the ability to rapidly classify all these returns. So if you get a radar return, one is from a goose flying, one is from a stealth aircraft. It's possible that if you have a target identification algorithm that is quantum powered, it will very quickly, much more quickly than conventional computers, be able to determine the pattern that distinguishes birds from a stealth airplane. But it's not a direct impact on stealth. Stealth still remains a different category of military capability.
So can they coexist? So essentially what I want to understand is quantum technology, as you've defined it and also explained, does it reduce the importance of conventional military platforms, or will it make them even more effective in times to come?
Both.
Elaborate.
Well, yeah. So the issue is, as I said, since for about the last 70 years, the idea is that people in military systems have been trying to build networks, and so this has promise. You can do things where you have multiple weapon systems, an airplane, ship that launches a missile, a ground-based artillery cannon. They all are together, and a commander looks at a single target on the battlefield and says, "Okay, what's the best thing to do this?" And instead of saying, turning to his artillery captain and say, "Fire 100 rounds," he can say, "Well, let's just drop a bomb from an aircraft," or rather than risk an aircraft, let's fire a missile from a ground-based artillery. And, when the target moves, they have visibility over it. The challenge is, the real issue here, and quantum, I think, will probably exacerbate that, is that it's inside human minds where we have trained generations of soldiers and sailors and airmen who have become accustomed to a really high degree of certainty in information. And the idea of managing uncertainty in the battlefield, which commanders in earlier wars, that was really the genius of their battlefield. You look at some of the battles that, say, that the Duke of Wellington fought in India. There was a major battle where he basically just looked at the terrain and realized there's two villages on each side of a river. There must be a ford there, even though he hadn't reconnoitered it, and that allowed him to cross the river and defeat the forces he was fighting. That sort of intuition and thinking without perfect knowledge is rare in today's military, increasingly rare. And quantum has the ability to, first off, disrupt conventional munitions or conventional thinking for commanders who don't have it, but it will increase the reliability or the reliance on these communications for those who do. So it comes with risks and benefits, but in the long term, I think that certainly the nations that develop it first will have a significant advantage, particularly in secure communications for some time.
Understood. Let me take your focus to the Russia-Ukraine front. What does Ukraine's reliance on Starlink reveal to us about the changing role of commercial technology, but in modern warfare?
Yeah, good question. So Starlink, the beauty of Starlink is that unlike most military communication systems, which, there's maybe like one emitter and one or two satellites and then one receiver. With Starlink, you have thousands of satellites. And so the signal goes up. And if one satellite is out of location, we used to have problems on military operations. You just couldn't get a satellite because it was in a different orbiting location around the world. But with Starlink, there are literally thousands of them. I mean, Musk developed Starlink because he was shooting rockets into space without payloads. He basically said, I need to shoot something into space to justify this rocket program. Starlink is a supporting effort for SpaceX. So there is such a broad mesh that basically almost anywhere in the world, certainly south of the polar regions, you can have continuous communications. And if one signal is interrupted or intercepted or jammed, the signal jumps to another satellite, and it's just very hard to keep up with that. So that mesh of satellites is the real superpower of Starlink. And what that does is that gives Ukraine almost continuous communications. Yeah. And it allows them, for example, to enable, say, a missile that's flying deep into Russia. It's very hard for Russia to jam it because the signal that guides that missile may pass from 15 satellites in the course of its flight.
Understood. You paint that picture, which will be easy for anybody to understand. Colonel David, let me also get your, assessment on how this really functions. From radars to satellites feeding data to an active missile or a drone that is zooming in on its target, there are countless scenarios that one can imagine of how the communication travels and the intelligence that comes in. Can you explain how communication in a battle zone is conducted between multiple domains? If you can explain it for our viewers.
Yeah. So there's a vulnerability here, and the vulnerability is that almost all communications go through the electromagnetic spectrum. And what we're seeing, particularly in the Russia-Ukraine war, is the increased importance of electromagnetic warfare. And I got to tell you, this is something that historically has been neglected at the tactical level. It's been sort of a strategic thing. But I was looking back, in my 30-year career in the U.S. Army, I don't think I ever had a conversation, and I was in exercises or deployed at Corps headquarters and division headquarters, but I don't think I ever had a conversation with an electronic warfare officer, a dedicated electronic warfare officer, outside of the specific application of jamming enemy air defense radars. So it's something now, though, that people realize you can stop all your communications, and a lot of the newest missiles and drones are either using a fiber cable, so that there's literally a line that can't be jammed but can be cut, or we're seeing a return when the German Navy did a round the world ship. They found out that their navigation signal was being jammed by China, and they actually had to resort to using signal flags, semaphores, to pass messages between the ships. This sort of we have gotten used to a commander sitting surrounded by screens that gives him a perfect picture, and particularly during the global war on terror, where there wasn't a sophisticated electronic warfare threat, we had persistent drone video overhead. People got used to seeing a constant real-life picture of what's going on the battlefield. And that level of fidelity is not something that you'll have against a peer or a near-peer competitor. So what we're seeing in modern warfare is that commanders have to learn how to accept risk. They have to learn to operate with imperfect information. And that's really, really difficult. And I fear that that's a skill that has not been rewarded over the last 30, 40 years. I think that the real revolution in military affairs is education of officers and training them to operate with imperfect information. So far, that's pretty neglected.
Understood. And somebody of your experience can really vouch for it too. But let me also come to this point, Colonel David. Increasingly, we're hearing about GPS-denied zones, and drones have been created, which are meant to function in these GPS-denied zones. But our larger discussion today is around quantum sensing and increased or enhanced military comms. How does that penetrate through GPS-denied zones, or will that kind of cut off the communication already? Over to you.
No, it should help. So the most effective way to deal with it, first off, the reliance on GPS is really remarkable. I was in graduate school during Operation Desert Storm. So before I went to graduate school, the only satellite-based communication in my infantry battalion was a half-a-ton Humvee-mounted satellite issue for the mortar platoon. And when I came back during Desert Storm, everybody got issued commercial little pocket GPS things. And I realized that in the 2 years I'd been in graduate school, everybody in the Army forgot how to read a map. They all became dependent on GPS. So one of the best way that a missile or a drone can avoid reliance on GPS is to have terrain mapping software. So this is basically a computer in it that looks down at the ground and maps it. It compares what it sees on the ground to the map that's in it. Quantum computing allows you to build those maps rapidly and then to update them with great fidelity so that you can launch a drone or a missile that doesn't have active communications with the place that launched it, that can, and very cheaply, rather than expensively, can engage in that sort of ground software mapping and will be able to operate more effectively, hit its target in a denied area.
Understood. Colonel David, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for making time joining me here on Defense Pulse.
Thanks for having me.